take your Valium, and we stand by that. But this is really a broader issue. It's not just Ottawa. It's if the City of Ottawa does this, or if the citizens of the City of Ottawa allow their government to get away with implementing this plan, then you're going to see a similar plan starting to crop up in metropolitan areas, not just in Canada, but across North America and indeed probably throughout Europe as well. So this is a very serious topic, actually. We laugh about it and joke because there's a lot to laugh and joke about around it. But I think we have to take it, somewhat seriously too. So, Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about this plan that the City of Ottawa here in Canada has put together?
Yeah, sure. Their objective is to transition Ottawa, and I'll read the exact quote, to a clean, renewable, and resilient city by 2050. The sad thing is it's going to actually transform Ottawa into a polluted, fragile, and bankrupt city, suffering from regular blackouts and business failures. So it's going to do the exact opposite.
So nothing's going to change.
Well, it's going to be much worse. They're actually going to ruin the city, and very few people would voluntarily choose to live here if they actually do what they're talking about. They're trying to actually have net zero emissions by 2050 in the community, and to do that, they want to completely get rid of all fossil fuel usages, or in some way, compensate for them, but they want to focus on wind and solar power and electrifying the whole city. They want our cars, our buses, everything to be electric. Now, the trouble with this, Nick, and Joseph, is that the electricity system is nowhere near as reliable and resilient as the natural gas system. Like, for example, when was the last time your natural gas went out? Most people could scratch their head and not remember any time. But everybody can remember when their electricity went out. So if you transition a city, and even if you are successful in providing enough power, which they wouldn't be, and you kept the prices, within reason, you still have an enormously less reliable system. You're going to have blackouts, and the impact of that will be much, much worse. So in an effort to actually make us an electrified, renewable, clean city, they're going to bring in, for example, 710 industrial-scale wind turbines higher than the Peace Tower. They're going to bring in 36 square kilometers of solar panels and a certain amount of hydroelectric on the river. And, you have to realize, where would you put 710 60-story high wind turbines? Where would you put them? Because you're supposed to have, well, in the case of Europe, they talk about a 2-kilometer setback to any habitable dwelling. Ontario, I think it only has about a 0.5 kilometer setback, which isn't very good. But the bottom line is you can't put it then anywhere in the city or in the suburbs because you've got houses in places where people live and work within a 0.5 kilometer. So where are they going to put it? Well, I suppose you could cut down a lot of trees in the Greenbelt and put it there, but that doesn't sound like a very environmentally friendly approach to cut down so many trees. And you have to cut the trees down because otherwise they act as a wind block, so you wouldn't get the wind out of your turbines. Not only that, you have to have the turbines separated by sufficient distance that there's actually some wind energy in the downstream turbines. You can't put one right behind the other, or the second one doesn't get much in the way of wind, because, of course, when you take the kinetic energy out of the wind to produce power, to produce electricity, you actually slow the wind down. Now, the interesting thing also is they're finding that will have an impact on local weather. If you think about it, if you're slowing down the wind, that means that in the summer you have less cooling, less wind chill, which is a good thing in the summer. You'll have less wind chill in the winter, which is it's a bad thing to have less cooling in the summer, but you'd have less wind chill in the winter. So you're definitely affecting climate change just simply by putting up that many wind turbines. And of course, what do you think? I mean, to give you an idea of the kind of forces that are on these wind turbine blades, for a typical 60-story turbine, it's the equivalent of a fully loaded school bus at the end of a lever arm about as long as a football field. So there's huge forces. So they have to build massive concrete bases, which are far more than you see on the surface. They have to go down 10 feet, huge distance around the turbines just to keep them from falling down. So what do you think is one of the byproducts of producing huge amounts of cement? It's carbon dioxide. So in the long run, it's not going to be good for the environment anyways, and it's going to lead to massive blackouts and probably a lot of people dying.
So,
oh my God!
One of these, I don't know if you want to call them propeller or impeller blades.
Propeller, yeah,
propeller blades is 100 meters long.
Yeah, they're the size of a 747 wing. Okay, they are huge. And occasionally they break. Just recently, at the beginning of October, for example, they had a failure in Thunder Bay. And you should see, if you look it up on the web, you can see, and we have a picture of it in our report as well as a video. Man, when those things break, 60-story high wind turbine throwing around blades as big as a 747, I mean, this is a disaster. You don't want to have anybody nearby.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, apparently one in every, I think it's 2,000 wind turbines, these big ones, burns to the ground every year. Every year. So what that would mean is that with 710 of them in Ottawa, every 3 years, one of our turbines will burn to the ground. And they do burn to the ground because they're so hard to put out, the fires, when they're 60 stories up. And also, when you get those fires burning with lithium and stuff, you don't put them out easily. You usually just let it burn until the whole thing collapses and falls into a massive toxic waste result. And what about all the birds? Okay, I mean, huge numbers of birds are killed by these, and even worse are bats. Twice as many bats are killed. I have a friend who's a bat expert, and he says that some bat species will be driven to extinction because it doesn't just kill the bat when they hit the blade. Even if they go in the low pressure zone behind the blade, it's the sudden change in pressure. It causes their lungs to burst and they drown in their own blood. Oh, wow, this is like really environmentally friendly. No, it's not.
This
and
is out of a horror show.
I know. And where do you think they get the rare earth elements and the other materials to make wind turbines? Well, China.
I know where they get them.
Yeah,
they get
China.
them from those very friendly, environmentally sensitive places like China.
Yeah. And they use the Uyghurs slave labor to get a lot of the and they get a lot of the slave labor to work on things like rare earths. The Congo is the world's largest supplier of cobalt. And in the Congo, you can imagine what their environmental standards are, but their human rights standards are even worse. They have 40,000 children working in the mines to pull out cobalt so that we can have electric vehicles and feel good about the climate.
It's just, you know what, Tom? I'm absolutely gobsmacked. Like, I knew this was bad. I knew what they wanted to do was terrible. And it's all to feed this pipe dream that David Suzuki talks about so much and Al Gore used to talk about so much. Fortunately, we haven't heard much out of him in the last little while, and that's fine by me. But let's be honest. This thing is a monster of our own making, and we don't have the courage to slay it. And I'm being a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for?
You're being soft on them. You're being soft on them because it's going to require politics. I mean, what's going to happen is at some point in the future, when we have regular blackouts, when our cars don't start, the buses break down halfway around, people are frozen on the corner at minus 30, then we end up with massive blackouts like we did in Texas. You know, in Texas, which only went to like minus 2 or something, it wasn't cold by our standards.
This was last winter?
Yeah, in February. That was caused, and the media won't tell you this, but that was caused by their excessive dependence on wind power. 700 people died in Texas. You don't hear that either, because what happened is they lost power, the gas lines froze. You know, Nick, what they did, and this is just so insane, you need energy to run the pumps to push around your natural gas, to operate the valves and things like that. Well, right. If you're sitting on a natural gas pipeline, obviously you should use the natural gas to power the different facilities to circulate the gas. But they, as a result of their concerns about climate change, decided to run the natural gas pumping and valves and other things with wind power. So even though the gas lines were full of gas, they weren't pumping it around because they didn't have the power. And here's the sequence of events. A few days before the big storm hit in February, Texas was getting 58% of its electricity from wind. And of course, Texas boasts that they have more wind power than any state in the union, which is true. 58%. Then just before the storm hit, it dropped to virtually zero. And then the storm hit. So natural gas had to compensate for a sudden drop of 58%, plus the impact of sudden cold weather. And what with the gas lines freezing up and then not being able to operate them properly and the huge demand, they just simply didn't have enough power. So the fact is, people like OAC in the United States, that representative nutcase. She says, it's because the natural gas failed. Well, it failed because the major source of electricity failed just before it, and natural gas couldn't keep up. So if that happens to Texas when it's only around freezing or a little below, what will happen to Ottawa at minus 30 when there's suddenly a quiescence in the wind? I mean, we can have low wind for a whole week. And what are we going to do? Say, cancel all of our operations? You can't drive anywhere because you can't charge your car. We would have huge deaths.
Even here where the electricity is, we don't have the same kind of distribution problem as they have in Texas.
Yeah, that was another issue.
If you have an electricity failure, the natural gas is not going to continue to heat your home because the valve to open the gas supply to your furnace is electric, and the fan to blow the air through the house is electric too, unless you have hot water heating, in which case the pump runs on electricity. Let's go to the phones. We have a call here from Robert in Montreal. Robert, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think we can hear you. You are on with Nick and Joe and Tom Harris.
Okay. Since you guys are talking climate change to explain everything, did any one of you have seen extra leftist Michael Moore's movie Planet of the Human?
Yeah, it's excellent, and everybody should watch it. While I don't agree with his overall thesis that we have to stop, modern society, he really shows that in many ways wind and solar are the most environmentally destructive energy sources on the planet. So, everybody should look it up. Planet of the Humans.
Planet of the Humans.
Yeah, that's right.
Was from Michael Moore.
Mm-hmm. And he's a leftist
just
himself.
Look at his movie. He says, solar panels. How are solar panels made? It's coal and quartz that are melted together using coal to melt it. So how environmental is that?
Yeah, exactly. And the main energy source to make wind turbines in China, which is the biggest supplier, is coal.
Yep. So electricity is very nice, but what is your source creating your electricity? If it comes from coal, and it's useless. It's
gas.
Stupid. Look at where your electricity, especially in the States.
Well, that's right. It's far better to simply burn the coal in a clean coal station and get the energy directly than making a flimsy, expensive energy source like wind and solar and then using all that coal to make them in the first place. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Nick, you were trying to say something.
Nick.
Yes. Go ahead, Robert.
Go ahead, Nick. Okay, well, I was going to ask, Nick, you said you haven't heard from David Suzuki lately?
Oh, you're preempting us.
No, other than... No, it was Al Gore I hadn't heard from lately, and that's fine by me. We don't need to hear from him.
I thought it was David Suzuki because he made a whopper. David he says, the next stage after this, they're going to have to be pipelines blown up.
Yeah, and he wasn't terribly condemning of that, eh?
Well, he wasn't.
The thing that bothers me about that is that anybody else making these claims, saying that kind of stuff in a public setting the way that he did, would be charged with inciting a riot or calling people to violence. And as far as I know, that's against the law.
Well, because he didn't.
How come he gets a clean pass?
Well, because he didn't actually say, okay, what we have to do next is blow up pipelines. I think what he did.
You know what he did say, because I read the article. They said, do you condone this? No, of course not. But what do you expect people to do? That when this kind of stuff happens, you have to fight back. So
but
he didn't come out and endorse it specifically, but certainly through implication he did.
Okay, but you see, the point he's making. Actually, I have to say this: I'm not a David Suzuki fan, not even close. But the point he's making actually is a valid point, and I think we should be paying very close attention to it. And it comes from people like